Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to be having another webinar in honor and celebration of Florida Bicycle Month. My name is Alyssa Frank. I am the pedestrian bicycle coordinator here at the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. And I have the pleasure of introducing our friend and partner, Matteo Jar. Matteo works at Decisio as a data analyst and planner with expertise in statistical analysis of renewable energy and transport data, with a focus on bicycling and walking, as well as consultancy on the social costs and benefits of active mobility on society. He has developed the social cost benefit analysis methodology for several cycling and mobility projects, and is interested in the study of impacts of active mobility on society. His main work at Decisio concerns the quantitative statistical analysis of mobility data, strategic planning, as well as communication and dissemination activities about bikenomics, mobility solutions, and energy planning. Very excited to have Matteo present today. We're going to talk about bikenomics and really how bicycling infrastructure can improve local economy of communities. So with that, I am happy to pass it on over to Matteo. Actually, let me very quickly mention, we're going to do the slides, and then after we will be doing some questions and answers. Feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the window. And with that, Matteo, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Alyssa, and yeah, thanks a lot for having me here. I'm sharing my screen right now, and it should be on right now. Can you give me a thumbs up, Alyssa, if it's okay? Yes? Okay, perfect. Yeah, as Alyssa anticipated, the topic of my presentation today, the core of a lot of my activity as a consultant, is about bikenomics, which is a strange word that basically means just using the tools of economics to study the impact that cycling, more cycling usually, has on society. The content of today's presentation is divided in three. The first is, why do it? Why do we bother? Why does it make sense to have an economic approach towards cycling? I mean, it's just you should think it's just cycling. It shouldn't need any strange, any fancy economic approach. But there's actually good reasons for doing that. We are going also to explore a little bit how bikenomics is done. We are not going to delve too deep into the methodology, which is BES, as I call it, boring economic stuff. But it is important to understand the different tools that are available for answering different questions, because not all of the questions are created equal, and you might need a toolbox that, as the sentence on the slide says, contains more than just a hammer. And then I'm going to provide a couple of examples of bikenomics applied around the world, also applied in a way that is easy to communicate, which is also one of the most important things in bikenomics. Very quickly, I work for an agency called a consultancy firm called Decisio. We do spatial economic planning applied to all sorts of contexts and phenomena. Bikenomics and walkonomics is one of our main expertise, but we also work, as Alyssa also was mentioning, on sustainable and renewable energy, on public space regeneration and design, and of course, just like what we're doing right now, education and dissemination activities. My name is Matteo Jar. My background is as an engineer, but I left, I would say, the purely technical realm because I think that many of the problems of society cannot be solved by purely a technical approach, and so I'm very much into the processes of governance and decision making. And of course about communication and, as I said, dissemination activity. So shifting the view actually about cycling, why does it make sense to talk about cycling with an economic lens? And I like the dissertation that you used to write in high school. It is always good to start with a definition. And the definition, this is really important. The presentation today is not so much about cycling, I would say. It's more about understanding the economics of it. So we're not going to talk about cycle lanes at all. When I ask people about the definition of economics, they more or less all cite these words, these terms. Savings, the financial crisis, Wall Street, a salary, my cash, inflation, all of that. And money seems to be the most important topic that people associate with the term economics. And I think this is wrong. And I especially think this is not just wrong, but it's actually a bit damaging the idea of why economics is useful. We're not going to talk too much, or we shouldn't talk only and too much about money. Why economics was born is really because we have limited resources. We have to make decisions in a condition of scarcity. We cannot have everything. We have to decide if it is going to be A or B, because we have limited resources. And economics is the science of how to make decisions in condition in which I cannot have it all, in conditions of scarcity. When we talk about mobility planning specifically, we are talking about scarcity of, well, everything, of course, but specifically money. I think as planning agencies and people who work in the field, you know that very well. But we are also talking about scarcity of space. You know, typically this cycle lane doesn't fit because the road isn't wide enough and all of that. And we have scarcity of time. I mean, climate change is like a wall we are running towards at maximum speed right now. So we have, in many cases, just a limited amount of years to act on, for example, the CO2 emissions that we cause. And of course, there is a limited amount of political will to act on specific topics. I could do it once or twice, but I would have a hard time possibly repeating the same effort for a number of times. And so this is I think the context, the most interesting and useful context in which we can put Bikenomics. I have 1 year. I have €1 million, $1 million, sorry. I have one road in which I want to do an initiative. What is the best use that I can make of that 1 year or $1 million? And if I don't ask myself this question, what I'm probably going to do is just to repeat what I've always done, which is, as we will see, a costly mistake when it comes to mobility, I would say. And this is really where it makes sense to have an economic approach to transportation, and specifically economic approach to cycling. Economics comes in to support decision makers and to help them understand that there are not just one effect of one policy action about mobility, but a number of effects. And cycling in particular is an interesting realm for me as a consultant and as a researcher, because it has so many effects on so many realms of life, usually positive effects, I must say. And it is very interesting to map them all and to try, of course, then we will see, monetize them all. So it's interesting to see and to map the interconnectedness of the policy effects and the policies that you as decision makers are trying to put into effect. And then, of course, we have to think about budget constraints. This is just a fact of life. We are, again, in conditions of scarcity. And in order to answer the question, if we did use public money well, I think we must use an economic approach to demonstrate that we tried, at least, or we succeeded sometimes. And then finally, I think it is important to understand that a Bikenomics approach is useful because economics is the language of decision making, is the language of power. Decisions are made or not made because of their economic impact. And so the idea, and this is the end of this first section, is that the economics perspective, although it seems like we are taking cycling and we are making it a very narrow topic because we are only talking about its economics, it's actually, I would say, the other way around. We are taking cycling and we are taking it out of the box of just mobility, or even worse, just sport, just recreation. And we are talking about cycling as something that is both caused by society and that can have huge consequences on, as I said, many aspects of society. So we go from looking at cycling like this, two people on a bike going around and doing their business, to looking at cycling this way. So looking at cycling as I said, part of a society. And we're going to talk, and this is the next topic really, we're going to talk about the impacts of cycling on society. And why is this important? It is important for a number of reasons, but the main one I would say is that people who don't cycle, especially decision makers who don't cycle or are not used to thinking about this, they don't relate usually that much. If I show them, this picture here, they would say, yes, but I'm not them. Okay, those are cyclists. I hate the labels, actually. Those are cyclists, and I'm not like them. And also there are only a few of them, why it doesn't make sense to spend too much money on them. When you are capable of connecting that activity, those two people, with the rest of society, the picture does change. A couple of things here, a couple of disclaimers. I think there are a couple of disclaimers that are useful here to make. As you have probably picked from my accent, I'm not Dutch, of course, I'm Italian. And I think this is important to be said. Why it's not like I hate Dutch people. My company is a Dutch-based, an Amsterdam-based company. But there is an interesting thing to be shared here, which is I use Bikenomics professionally, not in the Netherlands. Because I understand that you might think, yeah, but this is a Dutch expert or Dutch company. You can do whatever you want about cycling in the Netherlands. There, it is going to be easy. I work in Italy. If you have the image of the typical Italian car driver in your mind, it's a stereotype, but it is accurate. Basically, this is the type of mobility culture that we have in Italy, is very car centered, and so I do use Bikenomics a lot to shape the way we talk about cycling in a difficult country. Let me say, with respect to the culture of cycling that it's here, which is only about sport. And I use Bikenomics to support decision makers to make decisions and to show that their decision had good impacts on the society. There's another disclaimer that I would like to make. I am not a cycling advocate. That's not my background. I came to cycling after studying and working as a professional. The reason I talk a lot about cycling is not that I am an advocate, is not because I am passionate about cycling. It is because in my work I've learned that cycling works very often. So I would say I'm not a cycling advocate as much as a doctor is not an aspirin advocate. A doctor prescribes an aspirin not because he's passionate about aspirin, but because aspirin in 60% of the sicknesses that you might have works. And I think this is the same for cycling. When my clients come to me, to us, and ask for a set of solutions that would help resolve mobility issues in their territory, yeah, in my experience, you cannot avoid talking about cycling. Cycling has a huge potential to solve many of those issues. And so that's why I approach cycling, and that's why I talk a lot about it, because it works very often. Although, as I will mention later, not all of the times. Bikenomics then is useful to, as I said, reshape the view on cycling. We go from cycling is an expensive proposition, but guys, we gotta do it for the environment. This is not just a useless way, and not working way of putting things. A lot of people don't really care about the environment, or they would care in a very indirect way, but that doesn't call for an action. But it's also wrong, because cycling is not expensive. Even just to take care of the environment, cycling is a cost-effective tool to achieve sustainability, but in general, at large, to achieve sustainable economic development. So we go from looking at cycling as a necessary sacrifice, and we associate cycling with sweating, to cycling as a means to improve the quality of life of citizens. And when we have to talk with this guy, with the angry guy from the local council or whatever it is, who is all against cycling because cycling is going to destroy his way of life, we also have a tool for shifting the view with him. And I say him because, yeah, in my experience, he's usually a guy. We go from cycling infrastructure is not for me. I am not a cyclist. So you are going to spend a lot of money, and you will spend a lot of money on a few people, and it will also disadvantage normal people, those who drive. And again, in my experience, Bikenomics helps you understand that it is quite the opposite. More cycling is beneficial for those who cycle, yes, but especially for those who do not cycle, and for people who drive in particular. This is related to the effects of cycling on congestion, mainly. And finally, and broadly, we go from cycling is a partisan topic, and if you present it as a solution, you're an advocate, to understanding that actually, if I'm a citizen, if I understand this topic correctly, I would be very angry if my politicians do not invest in cycling, because not investing has a tremendous cost. Although it seems like it's the free option, it actually carries a tremendous cost if we continue doing things in mobility as we always had. So this is the end of this first why shall we use an economics approach to cycling. And I hope I made myself clear. And then, of course, there will be plenty of room for Q&A. Now to how. No, we've seen the why, and now to the how. How do we do it? If you only think that there is one number, there is one Excel spreadsheet, there is one multiplication to be made, well, sorry, that's not how it works. This is a good thing. It's a good thing because there is multiple tools that we can use to address multiple questions that can arise about cycling. So we have a whole toolkit of the bikeonomist, as we call it. There is a first level, I would say. The typical question could come from your own company. Let's say that your CEO is passionate about cycling. He is a cycling advocate, and he wants everybody to start cycling more because, yeah, he likes it. And the question that he might ask is, what's in it for my company? If the company invests something in cycling, what does come out of it in pure cash, financial terms, back to the company? So this is really about the return of investment, if you want. And this is what it's called a microeconomy perspective. The tool to answer these type of questions, which can be for a company, for a single shop, for a single person, the tool is typically called the financial business case or the cost benefit analysis. And this is the type of calculation, that involves the price of gasoline, for example. So, if you cycle 10 kilometers, you will save this amount of dollars every year. This type of calculation is in a more fancy way called a financial business case. But you can actually go broader than that. You can go from the microeconomic level, this person, this shop, this company, to the macroeconomic level. You can study what happens in a region, at national level even, or just even at a neighborhood level or single street, for example. And you can look at it not in terms of return of investment, but in terms of impact. If I, region X, invest in cycling, what's going to be the impact in terms of GDP, in terms of how many jobs I am going to create? The tool for this type of approach is called an economic impact study or an economic impact assessment. And it's a very interesting tool to understand that if you invest $1 in one policy, $1 million if you want in a policy, there is going to be a spreading of this economic impact across many different sectors. And if you invest in cycling a certain amount of money, you will have created an impact in a very different, a very wide set of economic sectors. There is one more level, actually, that you can analyze and that you can go into it, and that is called the welfare economy, usually, or economy at societal level. The question here is not really what's the economic impact in this region and what's the economic impact in sense of GDP, but really how does a policy, for example, investing in cycling, influences the well-being of people in the whole society. The tool here is, you might have heard of it, of course, the social cost benefit analysis. And here the key word is social. The financial business case can be called a cost benefit analysis because I say, purchasing a bike costs $100 and I will save this amount in gasoline. That's a cost benefit analysis, but it's a private one. The social cost benefit analysis is the same type of analysis, but we are going to put into it what we normally don't count. What's the dollar equivalent of climate change? What's the dollar equivalent of improving people's physical condition through more cycling? And how does this affect society? And this is really, I think, a powerful tool, especially for decision makers, to show that you invest in cycling and you're not just investing in cyclists. You are investing in the whole society, because the impact of me being healthier is beneficial for you looking at the screen right now. Because me being, I'm in Italy, you are in the US, but still, this is going to be beneficial because of many effects that we can talk about. But directly, for example, the cost of healthcare will be lower, especially if I'm in the US, of course, with you. But there is a very broad range of social effects that we can not only list and assess, but also monetize. We can associate a monetary value. So there are different effects at different levels, and this is important to understand because bikenomics can be tailored to understand and to approach a different situation. It can go from, let's see what happens if I build a cycle lane in front of that shop, or I take out so many parking spots, just to give you a critical example, to what happens if I increase cycling in the whole Florida to about 20% of the modal share. What are going to be the well-being effects for the whole state of Florida, for example? Very quickly then, as I said, the financial business case is really about those two arrows going back. Okay, I'm an investor. I want to know, is it good investment? Cash. This is what I'm interested in. And this is the microeconomic perspective. Just an example, we did a business case. We did several studies, but also a business case study for the University of Lima in Peru, in South America. And there we accounted for many different effects. It was not just a financial business case, but for example, that financial business case included saved travel costs and saved parking costs if the university had invested in providing the employees with showers. I mean, trivial things, right? Showers, a place to change their clothes, and all these type of cycling facilities. Then through interviews, we assessed how many people would have liked that, how many people would have started biking, for example, to work, and we assessed the impact on travel costs, again, so privately, and save parking costs for the university, for the investor. At macroeconomic level, the economic impact assessment is not about the return, it's about the impact on the territory. Okay, so you assess what it's called the direct, indirect, and induced economic impact. And you assess that in terms that are very easy, very direct to communicate. It's economic growth, GDP, and it's job creation. Quick example. During COVID, this happened, I'm not sure in the US, but it happened in many European countries. There was a huge impact on tourism, of course, so the public wanted to stimulate basically the holiday industry. There was holiday bonuses, for example, giving out. Let's say that you receive $100, sorry again, in a holiday bonus. What you do is you take it and you go out and spend it, let's say, in a restaurant. That's called a direct impact of that policy. The government, let's say, gives €100 out, you spend it in a restaurant, direct impact. What happens then is that, of course, the restaurant, to provide you with that food, has to pay their supplier more. Food, dishwashing, blankets, whatever it is, they will spend more money themselves. And this is called an indirect impact. And then there is actually a third level in a more indirect, again, in a more fuzzy also, if you want, way. The employers and also the restaurant owners will earn more money thanks to that stimulus package, let's call it. And they will also have a tendency to spend more. And this is called an induced impact. The sum of these is called the economic impact, total economic impact. And this is just one of the main ways in which economic growth happens. And so you can assess these different impacts. And also what's interesting is you can assess where those impacts occur, in which economic sectors. We did a study in Northern Italy about increasing cycle tourism, a very specific phenomenon, in one of the prime tourist destinations in Italy, close to Venice, basically. And there we could assess the direct and indirect economic impact, but also we could assess where those impacts would occur. It would occur, of course, we're talking about tourism, so in the hotel industry, but then, of course, it would occur also in a wide array of other economic sectors, manufacturing, and you find out that there are interconnections across the economic sectors that you wouldn't normally expect or be able to assess. Just to give you another example of economic impact assessment, there was a study from the International Energy Agency, which, to be honest, is hardly a bike advocate type of agency. It's a quite traditional, I would say, type of agency, but they studied the jobs created per investment in the transport sector. This was done a couple of years ago, I think. And it was very interesting for me to read it because their main conclusion, they have a graph on it, which is this one. Their main conclusion is that if you want to create jobs and you want to invest in the transport sector, you got to invest in walking and cycling more than in anything else, more than in electric cars, infrastructure, which is actually close there, much more than in cars production, for example. And this is also interesting because all of the talks about, getting our jobs away. Our jobs are, being exported to China, whatever you want to add in there. When, for example, a car manufacturing industry goes away, this is interesting because this graph would and this study from the International Energy Agency would also put that in doubt. And I think this is an interesting proposition. Finally, the last tool, the social cost benefit analysis. This is again a third and different type of perspective on the impacts of cycling on society. And again, it's not just about what we normally consider to be money, to be value also, because the environment, we do want to protect the environment, we do want to do things about climate change, but it is not always something that it is easy to attach money to. But we can, with the social cost benefit analysis, we're able to monetize all these type of impacts, environment, health, the impact of congestion, which is, usually it's a huge impact. And we are capable to understand that when we compare all of these benefits and we monetize them, we can, in engineering school, you say you don't sum apples and pears. I don't know if that's an English thing as well. But in this case, we can sum apples and pears. We can sum things that we would normally not be able to compare, like health and in the environment and congestion, 3 different phenomena. We translate those into a value in terms of dollars, money, and then we can sum them up. And by summing them up, we are able to compare all of these impacts, these benefits, or not benefits, it depends, with the cost, for example, of investing in more cycling. And so we're able to understand if it makes sense in terms of collective welfare to, for example, spend all those money into cycling. I have a couple of examples of these. I'll go very quick. How much does time cost? This is a strange question. Only Einstein would have asked that. But time is another type of scarce resource and a non-renewable, definitely the non-renewable source. And it's interesting because the value of cycling is the value that people attach to cycling is very different with respect to the activity they are carrying on. If I ask you how much money are you willing to spend if I, prevent you from watching a movie for 120 minutes, you would say, I don't want to spend any money for allowing you to prevent me from watching a movie, because that's a nice thing. Driving, for example, it's quite of a different thing. And that's one of the key arguments for autonomous vehicles, for example, is that they would allow you to not drive, but they would allow you to use that time of moving around in a more efficient, in a more pleasant, only just way. And then if I ask you, how much money are you willing to spend if I avoid you to be sitting on a dentist chair for 120 minutes? That's probably an interesting sum. You would be willing to spend some money to avoid having to do an unpleasant activity. And all of these considerations, these are, of course, stupid examples, but all of these considerations go into the problem of congestion, into assessing the problem of congestion. Because congestion is one of the largest burdens on society when it comes to mobility, usually the largest, and avoiding and taking out just a fraction, many times, of the vehicles that are out there to allow those people to actually move around by cycling or walking or other means, usually has a tremendous, sorry, I don't want to use tremendous, usually has a huge impact on the way the other people are capable of moving. So again, you provide an investment for cyclists, that's wrong. You provide an investment for the whole society most of the times. The health effects of cycling is another huge topic. We usually say, you should cycle because you keep in good shape. Sure, that's very limited. If you keep in good shape, as I said already, I gain an advantage. The World Health Organization says that the minimum amount of physical activity that we should all do is 150 minutes per week, if you consider a level of activity that is like cycling. And that's a very little amount. We still don't do it, most of us, but it's a limited amount, and it's about 7 kilometers per working day, 3.5 to go and 3.5 to go back. And it's even less for walking, because walking is more strenuous. And the World Health Organization says one of the easiest ways to achieve this important target of having everybody exercise at least a little bit would be to have them move by walking or cycling, active mobility. They move anyway. They have to go to the office or the grocery shop or school anyway. If we were capable of having this incorporate a movement and some exercise, it would be a huge impact for society. Why? For many reasons. One of them being that we are less sick when we are more physically active. And this being less sick has a huge impact in terms of sheer healthcare costs, for example. But it also has an impact, a social impact, with respect to the fact that we live longer. That's a positive impact. We have an improved quality of life when we are healthier, especially because when we then get older. This is important because it concerns especially the silver age, especially when people get older. When they get older and they have been for their life physically active, they experience those, let me say, last years in a much better way. And also, and significant in terms of economics, in terms of sheer money, we are much more productive at work when we are physically active. So this is actually interesting also at company level. This is an example of something, as I said already, that we did in Lima, in Peru, South America, in which you can see that there is a number of effects that you can actually incorporate in a social cost benefit analysis. They go from the purely financial to some also qualitative effects that you are not able to always to monetize, but you can at least say that they are there and describe them in qualitative terms. The typical result, and then we are also done with the second part, and we go to our almost conclusions. The typical result of a social cost benefit analysis is something like this. You assess the impacts of driving, the impacts of cycling, and in this example, I would like to mention the impact of walking as well. All of those different impacts, traffic congestion, road crashes, local air pollution. For what concerns car driving, I'm simplifying, vehicle, but let's say car driving. You can then compare them with the positive impacts of, those are all related, the positive impacts of cycling and walking are all related, in this example, to being active, to the physical activity. What you find out is an interesting result. Driving is not only a cost for myself, I have to pay gasoline and insurance and all of that, but actually puts a net cost on society, on everybody else. How much? In this example, and it's just an example, the results can be different in different contexts, about 20 euro cents per kilometer. If I cycle instead 1 kilometer, I produce a social benefit. Again, this is not a private benefit. This is not what I gain in my wallet. It has nothing to do with that. It's a societal benefit. It's a money translation of the value of those positive impact for society of about 14 cents per kilometer. And when I walk, this is almost double. It's actually almost, in this case, again, 24 euro cent per kilometer. What does it mean? It means that if I am capable as a decision maker to take someone who's now driving a car and convince him and incentivize him through infrastructure, for example, to cycle around, I will take out those 20 cents and I will produce those 20 cents of societal cost, and I will produce another 14 cents of societal benefits, the net gain being 34. And if I can do that as well, from car driving to walking, the impact is even larger. That has to do with the fact that walking 1 kilometer requires more physical activity than cycling 1 kilometer. Okay, so I will be in even better shape. The impact in terms of health is going to be even more significant. There's also one interesting caveat, one interesting result to that. If I were to take people from walking to cycling, which is a risk when I invest in infrastructure in a not perfectly planned way, well, I am going to create a damage to society in that case. This is one of those cases in which I am not like, a cycling advocate. I don't want everybody to cycle. I want, especially the people who are now driving a car, I want them to cycle. I don't want people going necessarily from public transport to cycling, which is a risk if poorly planned again. And especially I don't want people that are now walking to start cycling, and for example, also to start using electric scooters. That's also a risk, because in that case, I'm actually damaging society. Now, I understand that this is probably your face now. First of all, I'm talking since almost 40 minutes now, but also I think you're thinking, yeah, sure, interesting. Yeah, Matteo, fine. But cents per kilometer first, I don't understand what they are because maybe I think in dollars and miles. So I'm sorry about not doing the conversion. But also it doesn't sound like much, right? I mean, 34 cents per 1 kilometer, sure, fine. Consider that just in Europe, for example, some 5,000 billion passenger kilometers were traveled in Europe in the past years. This has gone down a little bit during the pandemic, but it's likely to actually be the same, pretty much the same figure in 2022. When you do the calculation, the European Union has made the calculation. The societal cost of our current system of mobility is in the hundreds of billions without including the cost of congestion. And the cost of congestion is, yeah, I would say another 50% probably added on top of that. It's hard to generalize because congestion is really context dependent, but the cost of congestion is also going to be in the hundreds of billions of euros in the European Union only. Last session, last part of our presentation together, and I should be on time. Where does it work and where does it not work? Well, yeah, what I glabbled, the good, the meh, and the ugly. A couple of examples. This is an image from I think the Manchester City Council, and it's interesting because not because just the fast lane, which is a nice joke, but I like what they write. They write, if you cycle, you burn calories, you save cash, and you get there on time. What I think it's interesting in this infographics is that they're doing a financial business case, even if they wouldn't call it like that, or they don't know. They are interested. This infographics is about having people to cycle more. So what they are doing is that they are addressing the single person. You privately will burn calories. You privately will save cash, and you will get there on time. And so this is a private assessment of benefits, if you want. This is something that we did as the CISO. It was the Lima bike plan, which I already mentioned a couple of times. And here we did a social cost benefit analysis. And you can see that you can present the results in a very boring, I would say, fashion, like I did before. But you can also do, and this is something that I usually recommend spending a little bit of budget and a little bit of time doing. You can also use these analyses, which are quite on the nose economics analysis, I would say sometimes. And we write, 100 pages report if needed, but you can also summarize these results in a nice infographic so that people, not just like normal people, not just like myself, can understand and would want to read and also would want to discuss about these results. Same was done in the Netherlands. This is a Dutch example in which we actually merged the three analyses: the social cost benefit, the economic impact assessment, and the financial business case, to assess the impacts of cycling at the private level, at the jobs, you can see, for example, level, but also at more broadly at societal level. And finally, this is an infographic that we did for the World Resource Institute about why cycling is not just good mobility policy, but it's a sustainable economic development policy. And we covered in these infographics, and you can actually see the QR code for more information. And I think I will share the slide, of course, through Alyssa. You can actually see that cycling has, as I was saying in the beginning, impacts on many different realms of life, I would say. Not just, again, about mobility, but it's land use, it's public health, it's education policy. This is something that we are normally not capable of monetizing, but it would be very interesting to try and do so. It's work productivity policy, it's many different things. Last thing, very for real now, last slide is, you wouldn't be honest in presenting any product if you didn't present its drawbacks. And about Bikenomics, there are quite a few. First of all, I already said it, there are a number of effects that are non-quantifiable. That does not mean that they are not important, and that does not mean that they should not be taken into account and they should not be discussed. I am sure that if among you there is somebody who cycles to work or to school or for everyday life, you hardly do it because the impact of congestion is 15 cents per kilometer, 12 cents per dollar, whatever that is. You don't do it because of that. You do it because you get pleasure, you do it because it makes you feel happier, you do it because it clears your mind, all of these things. And all of these things must be taken into account, and they cannot just be washed away as non-important. They are. What we normally do right now, we've become better at this, is we describe those effects and we try to quantify them when possible, but we also do not include them in the economic sheer money assessment if the sources, for example, that we find about those impacts are not enough reliable. There is a problem of quality. You do need a little bit of data for doing this research, these assessments. And if it is very poor data, then the result that you're going to get is going to be, poor, or at least not as accurate as you would like it to be. I can go back to what data is required more if there are questions about it, because I am not a huge fan of big data. I don't think you need complicated traffic models to do these type of assessments, but we can discuss about it more in the Q&A session, should the need arise. And then finally, some concepts of bioeconomics, economics in general, are ethically problematic. I think the shiniest example of this is a value called the value of a statistical life, which is used when you assess, for example, road crashes. You have to attach a monetary value to a death, which is something that people usually have a very hard time doing comprehensively. Because if you ask me what's the value of my son's life, I would say it's infinite, and you touch him and I kill you, and there's just that. And this is true for everybody when we talk about a specific person we love or ourselves. When we are policymakers, when we are decision makers, like myself, when we support decision makers, we have to make it a different, a different perspective, and we have to understand that you do have to understand what a statistical life's economic value is, or at least try to assess it, because again, as we said in the beginning, resources are scarce. We cannot do everything, although we would like, and so we have to allocate resources in an efficient way. To do so, we have to deal with these ethically problematic concepts as best as we can. The last point is, this is not a decision tool. It's not like you get, your Excel spreadsheet or your consultant like myself, and I say, the cost to benefit ratio of that cycling plan is 1.1, the benefit to cost. So benefits are a bit higher than the costs. And you go like, okay, decided, I will do it. And if I say the benefit to cost ratio is 0.9, then you're like, oh, then I don't do it, easy. That's not how it works, and that's not how it should work. This is a tool for supporting decision-making. Otherwise, you risk of being in a technocracy in which the Excel spreadsheet or the traffic model decides. Whereas, luckily, we live in a democracy. And since we live in a democracy, politicians have the responsibility, which then means electors, to make decisions. But Bikenomics is a helpful tool because it supports decision makers, and it gives you at least a rough idea, sometimes not even not so rough, about what the impact of decisions are going to be compared with the costs of investing. Thanks a lot. This is my email, but I'm sure that we will have the opportunity to exchange more during the Q&A, and Alissa will share the email. One last thing that I would like to mention is we are actually having a Bikenomics course these weeks. If you're interested in knowing more about that, again, drop me an email because the course is actually undergoing right now, but we will repeat it again in 2022. So I would be happy to have it there for going much more into boring economic stuff, details. Thanks a lot. Alissa, back to you.
Thanks, Matteo. That was such an awesome presentation. Covered a lot of material in there, and I think that it was, I took lots of notes, so I'm sure a lot of other people did as well. I do have some questions that are popping up. So you want to just go ahead? I can read them to you and take the best stab at it that you can.
Yes, please. I also have the chat in front of me, but yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. So the first one does have some Italian in there, so I will leave that to you. But you mentioned that.
Sorry, you go ahead. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You mentioned the challenge of overcoming resistance from both policymakers as well as individuals dependent on car travel. Are there any insights from behavioral economics that are useful to think about when designing nudges for changes to modal share in cities?
Yeah, Alessandro, grazie for your question. Yeah, difficult, interesting and difficult. Nudges, if somebody in the audience doesn't know, means, yeah, well, that's an English word, so I think everybody knows what it means. I usually have to translate it in Italian, but yeah, the idea of nudging somebody is the idea that you don't force them to do something, you don't enforce a policy on them, but you put in and there some elements that are going to gently push them towards what you actually want them to do, or what you think is for society at least the best thing to do. Not easy to find a nudging for mobility, but I think that behavioral economics show a couple of things. First of all, the narrative about I think this is the very first thing that I said. I think the narrative about sacrificing, it's a weak one, honestly, and so I usually push my clients, policymakers, to stop talking about cycling as something that we must do. The whole idea of sustainability that I think that we have been sold, or that we also sold directly, is this idea of, guys, we would love to not having to do this. It was so nice back in the days, but now there is no escaping. We gotta do this, even if we will live, in a worse world. We gotta take care of our kids. This is our responsibility. This is not working, and this is not only not working. This is wrong. The promise of sustainability is the promise of a better life. And if you ask, when we talk about cycling, someone in the Netherlands about getting their bikes taken away for, putting more parking spots, for example, there will be uproar there. There was actually uproar in the 70s. This is a historical fact. So a nudge, I would say, has to go in the direction of, shifting the view from the sacrifice to the, guys, we do this because if we don't do this, we are dumb. We are missing on an opportunity. If you want to go practical, I would say, stop building parking spots very close to the doorstep. This is the very first thing. When people have to walk 100 meters to the car, this is already some time that they would like to do something else. And this is already some time in which, that can be useful for them to rethink about the way they go around. This is also a second thing. It's not a nudge, not at all. But for me, cycling begins not with infrastructure, but with city planning. And I think in the US, you have a big problem on that. Even more we have in Italy, for example, because spread out cities, that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare. So again, work with companies to influence and to incentive, not enforce, but to incentivize working from home, working more closely to home, not having schools 20 miles apart from where people live. All of these things, they are not nudges technically, but all these things I think are the first point in order to make it easier for people to start cycling more. I understand, Alessandro, that I did not completely answer your question, but I don't think I have a good nudging recipe for you there.
So he did also have a follow-up to that first question, which was, how can integrating public and private mobility encourage the adoption of cycling? And what policy initiatives are incentives are effective in this regard? For example, Trenitalia has partnered with a shared mobility company to allow ticket holders to bridge the last mile of their trip from the station with scooters or bikes.
Yeah, again, very good question. A number of things really can be done by the public and private together. And this is also, I think, actually, again, related to maybe to nudging, if you want. I encourage my clients usually to think about the going from A to B, the transportation, as an experience, not just as a flow. For example, people don't cycle because in going from A to B, and A being the doorstep, it's not anywhere, it's in the house, and B, being in the office or in the school, they experience something wrong. Many things sometimes. And so, for example, in the private sector, what I think is paramount importance is guaranteeing people at B get a safe place for putting their bike. And it's not just safe, it must be easy. It cannot be, carrying your bike, up to the third floor. And then there is a bike deposit. That doesn't work. That will always be empty. And what I also write in my cycling plans many times is cycling must become obvious. If you have ever done the experience of cycling in, let's say, Amsterdam or Copenhagen or another cycling city, you know that when you get out of your house or the hotel, the idea of going to look for your car, which is parked somewhere else, not there, pay for the parking place, get your way around all of those, let's say, blocked roads, open roads actually, is a nightmare. Whereas your bike is there, you take it, directions are easy. You don't have to, picture a path of cycling lanes which are going zigzagging towards your destination. You just go there. It's the most direct, fastest. Cycling is obvious. No one would go, God, I wish I didn't have to cycle, but I gotta do it again. I gotta do it for reducing CO2. Dutch people don't care about CO2 as much as I do. Okay, and they do it because it's easy. So the private has the opportunity to do that at B, I would say, for example, or at A. So at the beginning of the trip, trivial things like being able to bring your bike inside your condo, for example, are super important. Those are amongst the barriers that people cite for not cycling. And finally, I would say that private and public, this is, you say it and you never believe it, but they do have to work together. They never do it because, public thinks that the private sector is just there to make money. I don't think it's true. And the private thinks that the public sector is full of people that are not, they couldn't work anywhere else, so they went to the public sector. And this is, again, complete nonsense. They do have to work together, and they will reap the benefits. For the public, reap the benefits of people cycling more. For the private, there are tons of benefits to be reaped by having a more healthy workforce. This is just the very first one that comes to mind.
Definitely. So I do have one more question in here. And this one is actually, is it possible for you to share the report of Lima?
Yes, I think it should. I think it should be public actually already. I think it might be on the Lima's municipality website, but I'll check if it is publicly available. Of course, I think it is. I'll share it. Sure, no problem.
Yeah, you can just share that with me and I can share that to everyone who attended today.
Of course, of course.
So, of course, I do have a couple questions.
Please.
And if any other questions pop in, I will definitely let you know. But I know that, down here, specifically in Florida, but, all over the country, a lot of times as a planner, when we go ahead and we propose adding bicycle infrastructure in communities, it is often met with not support, no support from, politicians in these communities, and not all the time, but sometimes. What do you think is a good way to kind of changing the perception of the bicycle infrastructure for those politicians to really help them understand that there are so many more benefits than, concerns with adding that sort of infrastructure?
Yeah, yes. I mean, this is the typical context in which I work, right? This is a typical question I get asked for that then comes from somebody, and then we do a project about it, of course, a Bikenomics analysis, for example. Yeah, there is, I think, two very different sides of answer. As you understand, I'm not, synthesis is not my quality, so I'll try. I talk too much all the time. Anyway, there are two sides, I would say. One is a psychological side. People who don't cycle, they think that either cycling is for weirdos or for superheroes. And you have to convince them that you, the one who's promoting it, and that, for example, if you cycle, you are neither. okay? And you have to convince them that you are just a normal person, and you just like them, you know, you want to go where you have to go quickly, and sometimes you don't want to cycle, sometimes you're lazy and you take the car, all of those things. So you're a normal person. And so I always recommend that there should be some type of initiative to trick, let me say, decision makers to hop on a bike once and go around in a safe, in a place where it is safe, of course, not in your major artery. Just that is usually capable of triggering some thoughts. For example, I have brought people to Amsterdam or to Freiburg in Germany, which is another cycling city, personally myself, sometimes at a cost for my company even, just because I was like, okay, guys, you know, if we do this together, you'll understand. I can talk for a year, but if we cycle 1 hour together, my job is done in terms of convincing. So this is one side, the psychological, personal, private side. The other side, I think, is talking about the present a lot. Are you happy? Like, is this the best possible combination of mobility that we can have? Are we reaping a lot of the benefits, or are we not? Talking about the present, because the problem is that imagining the future is very hard for everybody. Especially, yeah, again, if you don't know exactly what cycling means, what a cycling city is, then you're like, yeah, but you're talking to me about something that is very uncertainty. I know the present, I don't know the future, and so I will stick with something that I know, because uncertainty is scary. If you talk, and in the analysis, what we always highlight is the cost of doing nothing. I think I've mentioned it. You know, there is always this idea that, oh, you're asking me to spend $10 million. Nonsense. I can't. Cycling is not important, etc. No, this is not what I'm asking. I'm asking you to invest $10 million to stop having a system which is, in many cases, damaging people's health and yes, the environment, and is actually damaging the economy with a lack of accessibility, for example, for everybody. So talking about the present, analyzing the present and how the present is actually expensive because we are not investing, again, in my experience, does sometime, again, I don't have a magic bullet for you, but in my experience, does sometime move a little bit the conviction of people. One last thing is start where it is easy, and make examples and make comparisons. They are better than you. What do you think? Shall we? Or, you know, you want to be left behind? I think that's also again half psychological trick.
Yeah, those are very helpful answers. And I found that, you know, as you're talking through, I'm thinking of local examples that I'm familiar with, of instances where we have done similar things to really try to, you know, get that sort of support.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, now that you were talking, something else popped to my mind. Something that I always say to municipalities and to public administrations in general: monitor your results. You know, you know that street that has taken you 5 years to pedestrianize it because of all those shop owners and all of that. Have you monitored that in terms of the economic impact, in terms of how people like it, etc.? Because this is a costly mistake not to. If it takes me 5 years to do one project, one cycle lane, or one pedestrianization, one refurbishment of public space, whatever, a plaza, whatever, I have to be able to go to the next time and not have to do everything from scratch. I must go to the next neighborhood and say, guys, people in neighborhood 1 did this, fierce opposition, we did it anyway. After 5 years, they gained 2 million euros in, and I would say they gained, I want to be very concrete, you know, shop owners gained from, like, you know, they are richer now. It's not just society, blah, blah, blah. No, their wallets are bigger than they were. I monitor that and I can show you that, and people are happy. And if we ask those people, now that they have a pedestrianized plaza, to go back, they would scream in terror. And then you go to neighborhood number 2 and show them this result. Especially if it is a closed place. If you go like, oh, people in Amsterdam, I don't care about Amsterdam in Florida, you know, it's a different planet. No, same city, same place, monitor your results. This is a precious resource that you have, and it should not go wasted.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you touched on this very briefly, but I don't know if it was intended, but language is so, so important when we do have these sorts of discussions with people. Like Matteo, you were saying, you know, we need to say that the shop owners gained income, gained money from that. And I think it's just a really good reminder that, you know, when we are planning and designing projects and working with communities, we do need to be cautious that we are using the right terminology to really help get that buy-in.
Yeah,
yeah.
Sorry, no, you finished. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna see what you were gonna say. You're good.
Yeah, it's yes, it is. Language is important. Of course, me in English, that's not as effective as it should be, but we do more and more projects. You know, we do cycling plans, we do bikenomics analysis, but when we get at the end of those, or even in the beginning, our clients are like, yeah, let's follow up with a communication initiative about cycling. We do those more and more with experts also, like we partner with experts. And I've learned many things actually that I didn't know myself. Example, never say cyclist and car driver when you talk about a project, because that is labeling people. And, you know, Alisa is a cyclist here. Matteo is a car driver there. They don't talk. They are not the same persons. Whereas I'm normally somebody who cycles. I use the sentence, someone who cycles. I'm not a cyclist. But today I'll have to bring my daughter to the doctor's appointment. It's snowing outside. I'll take my car. And that's what normal people do. And we don't want to transform society from a society of car drivers, which does not exist, to a society of cyclists, which also does not exist. We want to help people to drive less and cycle more, yes, but we are not into transforming, because that's also a matter of identity. We don't want to make you something that you are not. We want to give you an opportunity. So yes, I do think that language is of paramount importance, especially in a way, not scaring people, like you are taking them and moving them like a chess board. This is not what it is about. It's about, again, and also like shaping it in positive terms. What we found out is that public administrations communicate when there is a problem. You know, shop owners complain, and then they have like this small communication initiative. This is also wrong. I mean, cycling is not something that you should try to sneak into your public administration, into your territory, into your city. Something is an opportunity, and it should be presented as such.
Definitely. So I do have one more question that popped into the Q&A box. What is your assessment of the feasibility, financial, political, etc., of Milan's Cambio cycling network plans?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a so the question is done on purpose. The thing is that I was the project manager of the Milano's Cambio cycling plan activity. I don't know if it is on purpose. I'm not sure. So the question, was assessment of the feasibility. Yeah, I mean, man, I did it, so I think it is pretty feasible. I mean, yeah, again, I don't understand if the question is on purpose, if you know that we did that. In any case, so the plan of Milan, it's a metropolitan city of Milan, it's not the municipality, is an ambitious plan. We're talking about more than 750, 800 kilometers of cycle lanes to be built in the next 12, 13 years. So it's an ambitious plan. We did the Bikenomics quick scan Bikenomics study of that plan to assess the benefits, and the benefits are north to more than billion euros actually of actualized benefits for if that plan is implemented. And I actually think we've been very conservative on those assessment. Again, the feasibility, it's not a problem per se, I would say. If we talk about, you talk about financial and political, the cost of that plan is going to be in the hundreds of millions. I would say more than what was initially estimated at 250 million euros. It's probably going to be more than that. But again, the study that we did shows that it's money that is well spent. It will create more benefits, way more benefits, I would say. Political, again, there is a lot of work to be done in Italy about culture on these things. But I also think this is a good moment historically. COVID, strangely enough, and tragically enough, of course, in this realm, it has helped. People want to be outside. People want to be active, and in Europe, it's happening that many public administrations are making a much more of an effort than they were making 3 years ago or 5 years ago. So again, the question being directed to me is a bit strange, because of course I do believe that it is technically feasible for sure, and financially feasible as well. I know that Milan has invested already tens of millions actually in the plan, and of course I hope to see it through.
So
Alessandro, I invite Alessandro to drop me an email, of course, because I think he has a lot of maybe he's from Milan, so I think he has a lot of questions to ask. We can do that privately if you want.
I'll definitely share out your email after. And I should note that he did send in a comment also that he did not know that you worked on that plan.
Okay, then you're lucky. I guess I'm the right man to ask that question in a way.
So I do have one more question. I don't see any more in the Q&A box, so I will just make a note and say final call for questions. Throw them in there if you have one. My last question is, and I know your presentation touched on this a little bit, but aside from, cost benefit analyses, is there another way to really measure the impacts of constructing new cycling infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends who's asking and what impacts are we talking about. But yes, I mean, in principle, you only need a little bit. You only need time. If the impact that you are going about has never been, let's say, measured or has never been monetized, what you need is some research to see how to monetize that and what exactly is the impact locally, specifically. So you some activities that we also do require, going there, interviewing people, on-field studies. This is also part of what Bikenomics can do. It's not just, luckily, an Excel spreadsheet. It's also talking to people, which is much nicer. I think, again, so it really depends what the context is, but if you are interested in going local, then again, I think it's important to not just be at societal level, which is something that politicians do care about and talk about, but your local shop owner doesn't. And so again, the toolbox that I presented is important to be familiar with, because sometimes you ask for something, but then the wrong tool gets applied. Okay, so if you ask for exactly, I need to convince, I'm using shop owners because shop owners, in my experience, have a hard time with parking spots, for example. Mm-hmm. So you can do on-field studies. There have been a few done about, for example, the impact of a cycle lane on shop owners locally, and you can use the different toolkits. Yeah, you have to tailor your approach to the question. We've done social cost benefit analysis at national level. We've done some financial business case for a specific street, and you can do different combinations of the three actually.
Yeah, and I think your example was actually a fantastic one, because that's what we see here. A lot of times it is the smaller shop owners who say, no, you take away my parking spot to put in bicycle infrastructure, you're taking away my business. People park in that spot and then come into my shop and then they leave. But I think that a lot of times it's not, people don't consider that, having that sort of bicycle facility or bicycle infrastructure at all out front would actually allow for more business, because you have more people having direct access to that store, maybe have bicycle parking, so you can actually, provide space for more and storage for, parking your vehicle, whatever vehicle type that is, for more customers to come in. So I think that's something that is great that you touched on, because that's something that's often not considered.
It was an example that popped in my mind because it is a typical process. It is a typical phenomenon, and it's a typical opposition. What we have actually copied from other people who have done this very clever thing. As I was saying, you study the present a lot. because when you project people into the future, they are never going to be fully convinced, no matter what you do, pretty much. Are those local shops really being visited by people getting there only by car? I think this is a very interesting question. In many, many downtowns, this is not the case, especially when you talk about some type of shops. I mean, a refrigerator shop, yes, people are going to go there with a car, obvious reasons, and that's something to be taken into account. There is no answer that is valid for everybody. But a restaurant in the financial neighborhood at noon, it's unlikely that people are going to take a car from their office and drive to that restaurant, unless it is a super fancy restaurant. People are going to walk there most of the times. One interesting exercise is you go into a shop and you ask the owner, what percentage of your customer does come here by car? 90% is the answer usually. And then you get out of the door and you ask the first 50 people who get in, how did you come here? And possibly it's 90%. Possibly the guy or the lady, the shop owner was right. Many times we did this, we found very interesting, very different results. So people do get to the downtown shops without a car in many instances. It depends again. And so by showing that, you can show that if you actually encourage people to, encourage the walking environment or the cycling environment even more, you're actually going to provide more, as you said, more accessibility.
That's a social experiment I am definitely going to have to try out myself later. That sounds really interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. You've answered all of my questions, and I don't see any more popping into this box. So at this point, I would like to just, take some time and thank you, Matteo, for taking the time. I know it's afternoon for you. So thank you for taking your afternoon and spending it with us. And everyone who took the time to join us this morning, if it is morning for you all, thank you for taking the time and joining us. I hope that everyone got a lot out of this webinar and this discussion. And just so everyone's aware, this is recorded, it is on YouTube, and I will be able to share out the links in the PDF of the PowerPoint with anyone.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa, and everybody for having me. It was super nice to spend my afternoon with you. I'm happy.
Of course. Well, with that, I think we're done. We can end this webinar a little early. And like I said, thank you all. You'll be hearing from me soon. So.